All right, welcome to Forgotten America. I'm Steve Gruber.
And I'm Ivy Gruber.
Ivy, we get a chance during our regular lives, during our day jobs, to spend a lot of time with politics. But look, if you wanted to do one thing today that wasn't that, what would you do?
Ooh, that'd be a tough tie between fly fishing or wing shooting.
Yeah, there you go. So today's episode, we're going to go completely away from politics, which we try to do here whenever we can. But we're going to talk about some things that are important, like common sense, and just common decency, which I think is lost in the world these days. I mean, you see social media; it's a cesspool.
Oh yeah, well, rage baiting, one. No common sense in arguments.
Yeah.
They find a little clip and this is the truth, and when you challenge them and then they have nothing to say, or they run away, or they call you a Nazi.
Yeah.
So yes, very little common sense utilized in today's society, it would seem.
Yeah, I think you're right. So we're going to inject the common sense today with Patrick Dorinson. He is the Common Sense Cowboy, coming to us from St. George, Utah. Patrick, nice to see you today.
Good to see you, Steve and Ivy.
Glad to have you here. All right, so you've got a brand new book. I do want to mention this, The Common Sense Cowboy's Guide to Life, Stories from the Old Guy at the End of the Bar. Some of the best connections, we were talking about this in the break. If you want to find out where the fish are biting or the birds are flying or where the big elk is hiding in a woodlot, talk to the old guy at the end of the bar. There's some common sense we could start with. How'd you write the book?
Well, I've used to do radio, and I've done a lot of media, and I've done a lot of things in my life. And back in 2005, when my mom died, my mom was my cowboy influence in my life, and I decided to chuck the world of suits and all the meetings and all the flow charts and all of the press conferences and decided to follow the cowboy path.
Yeah.
And, I had to make a living along the way, but most of it was done through communications work and radio work and some TV work. And so I've always had this book in me. And a friend of mine said to me, you got to write all your stories down. You got to start writing all this stuff down. And so I decided that I was going to do that. And I do Newsmax. I do work on there. And so my agent at the time said, you ought to write a book. And, it's hard to write a book about yourself. And I found a guy, Matt Klickstein, who's now become more than just a ghostwriter. He's a friend.
Sure.
And he came up with the idea of, he interviewed me for like 30 hours. And then he curated the interviews basically into the book. So I wrote the book with my voice. And, I gotten to the point I don't want to get mad at the world. I don't want to say, get off my lawn, you young people. I don't want to tell them, you don't know what you're doing, or when I was your age, or, we had the good old days. I kind of want to just let them know, you're getting sold a bill of goods out there, and you better figure out how to, use a screwdriver and use a hammer in your life at some point. And you also better learn some of the things that are basic to being a decent human being. So that's kind of the reason why I got into writing the book.
Yeah, that's beautiful. We talk about that all the time. You'll come to me and go, do you see what this says? And we'll talk about different things. I mean, common sense. Where did it go?
Yeah. Well, not only that, but just the trust in your word, what you say. That is also kind of lost. Like, I'll definitely do this for you, and then you never hear from someone again, or it just seems like the values have changed in America sometimes.
Yeah, Patrick, I think that's a good point. A man's word is his bond.
Yep.
Is that still true with you?
Certainly is with me. It's true with all the cowboys and cowgirls that I know, and not just cowboys and cowgirls, a lot of people. It's the corollary to that is when you make a promise, keep it. And you remember Lonesome Dove?
Sure.
And you remember when, Gus is dying and Tommy Lee says he'll take him home, right?
Yeah.
So he doesn't have to be buried up north. And, it was a hard task. And yet he did it. Why? Because he made a promise. And so the corollary to that one is be careful what you promise. But just remember, you got to keep them. And when you shake somebody's hand, it's a signature. Now,
Yeah.
think about if you're buying a horse and you go up to somebody and he shows you the horse and you go, that's a good looking horse there. I'll tell you what, I'll give you 2,000 for him. Well, how about 22? Okay. And you shake hands, you agree on 22. Now, if you feel you need it, you might have a piece of paper later just so everybody knows you're not a horse thief. But you made the deal with the hand. The piece of paper just is something so you two know what you did, not so you two can back out of it. And to me, it's like nowadays the biggest course they teach in law school is loopholes.
Oh, they do. You're so right. You were sorry. I want to get to this story. Ivy and I were recently in Aspen. We were skiing out there. But there was this hat in town making cowboy hats for about $2,000 a piece. And this place was going great guns all day long. And, around the block till 9, 10 o'clock at night, all day long, every day. And you made an observation.
And we're sitting in a bar and having a couple cocktails and having a couple snacks. And I'm like, don't you think that if you wear a cowboy hat, you might want to know how to ride a horse? So there were so many folks that I saw, they're just with white, very white tennis shoes. You could, tell they probably haven't even ever seen a horse, maybe.
But they got the cowboy hat on, Patrick. and I guess what I'm getting at here, people are willing to basically deceive you as to who they are and put on this front, whether it's on social media or in the Hotel Jerome there in Aspen. Cool place, by the way. But here are all these people with cowboy hats on and, like she said, bright white tennis shoes. I mean, whatever happened to authentic in this world?
Well, first of all, never approach a bull from the front, a horse from the rear, or a fool from any direction. And it sounds like you were in the fool's paradise.
Yeah, that's right.
Look, and I freely admit I wasn't born this way, My mom grew up on a ranch in Colorado. Her father was a railroad engineer. Her mother died when she was 6. She had an older sister, how people got married back then, and you had second families and that. She had an older sister who owned a ranch. And she came into Denver where my mom was living with her dad, and she said, I'm taking Jeannie and I'm taking her out to the ranch because she needs, to get out of this place, and you can't take care of her. And it wasn't because my grandfather was mean or anything else. He just was working. And she was acting almost like, the missus of the small place they lived in. So my aunt took her out there, and my mom learned how to cowboy. And she did it all. And she instilled all of that in me. She gave it to my siblings as well, but I think I'm the only one it took. and like I said, her and I talked about it all the time. And she always told me, she goes, son, you got to learn how to ride a horse. You got to learn how to ride a horse. And it was in 2005 that I made the decision. I said, I'm chucking all this stuff. I'm gonna chase what she taught me. I've got to find out about it. And I did. And the first time I went to ride, I got the wrong teacher the first part. And,
we all been there.
I got bucked off and I cracked my pelvis.
Oh,
ouch.
No.
And so, I sat in my beautiful leather recliner for 12 weeks, wondering what to do next. And then I said, well, I got to get back on. I just have to. And I did. And so the woman who was teaching me, she was a Montana cowgirl, and she was great. And she taught me the basics and more than the basics. And, she says to me, she goes, I got to ask you, you're 55 years old. What are you doing getting back on? And I said, well, sometime I hope to see my mother again in heaven. And, if I didn't get back on, the first thing she'd say when she saw me was, so you broke your pelvis and you got bucked off and you didn't get back on. Are you sure you're my son? Now, as I told Debbie, I said, I could take that for a day or two, but not for eternity.
That's a fair point. I got to be honest, Patrick, I don't ride horses. I used to, but I had an experience outside of Cody, Wyoming. We're going into a fish camp, and it was a 22-mile trail. And in the middle of this trail is this thing called the catwalk, right? This catwalk
Yeah.
is about, I'm going to say it's 100 yards across. It's a very narrow trail. On one side, the mountain goes straight up. On the other side, it goes straight down, and it's all rocks. Well, you know this from riding horses. The horse is, however wide a horse is. And the
Yep.
trail is this little narrow thing. I can't see where his feet are. So I'm not liking this at all. I'm very uncomfortable. In some way, halfway across the catwalk, the horse decides, Ivy's heard this story, the horse decides it's time to turn around. Well, that doesn't sit particularly well with me, right? So I dive off. I go off the high side, and I get all banged up, and my shins are bloodied up, and I'm a little mess, and I'm a little angry. My outfitter comes back, really even-tempered guy, Tim, dry sense of humor, and he says, look, if you don't mind, stay in the horse's saddle because I haven't had a horse commit suicide yet. And I said, fine. And I said, fine. So I get back on the saddle. We ride no more than a quarter of a mile. And I look down the hill, and there's a bone pile right there. There's a horse bone pile right there. And I said, what's that? He just looks at me and he says, not my horse. And he just looks forward and keeps riding. But the moral of the story is that particular gentleman, he has draft mules that they raise on his ranch there in Cody, Wyoming. And I have found that I really like draft mules. They don't make rash decisions. They don't turn around in the middle of the catwalk. They stay where they're supposed to stay. And I feel real nice. And I'm a big guy. Look, I feel it's unfair to the horse. I'll go with the draft mule that's much larger animal. Anyhow, so that's why, I think I qualify for a cowboy hat. What do you think?
Oh, I think you more than qualify for a cowboy hat because you just had a cowboy experience.
Yeah.
And especially the part about, well, that's not my horse. I mean that is, and it's in the book, and I've told it before. The story of, what doesn't kill you is funny. And
there's truth to
I
that.
like that.
If I got a sec, I'll tell you this. So I'm at a branding, woman I know up in Idaho, and this is after, I don't do it every year, but, I've been to a lot of cattle gatherings in the fall where you gather the, cattle up from summer range and bring them down to winter range, brandings, things like that. I did a little competing in some events, nothing big. But, you learn a lot. And I just, when I'm with cowboys, I just keep my damn mouth shut. Because I'm there to learn. And I don't have enough lifetime left to learn everything that they know, because they kind of had a head start since they start when they're about, old enough to be set in the saddle in front of mother. And anyway, so my friend Jen calls me up, and they were supposed to brand in May, and she calls me and she goes, hey, we're going to brand. I know we postponed it a couple times because of the weather. I said, yeah. And she goes, so we're gonna brand, and why don't you come on up? And I said, okay. So I went up, and the next morning we all got up, and we had to build a little corral, take the fence panels off of the truck and build a corral to get the mamas and the babies in and sort them and all that stuff. But anyway, I'm in the branding pit with vaccination needles, and there's somebody with a very sharp knife to do another very delicate job. And, by this time, it was already June. So these calves, instead of, being down here, they're getting up there pretty good. So they're a lot bigger. So the cowboys are going in and, and they're roping them and dragging them to the fire. Well, this one kind of righted itself and stepped out of the loop and started coming at me like, as my mother used to say, hell bent for election. And it ran right over me. Now, why is it running behind me, over me? Because its mother's on the other side being held back by guys on horseback.
Yeah.
Right up at me, and as I'm going over, I roll over and I look behind me, and coming at me is a freight train of a mad mama cow.
Oh, no.
You're caught in the middle.
I'm thinking, well, it's been a good life. Maybe I'm going to see my mother quicker than I thought. And all of a sudden, all I saw was a pair of horse legs right here, about that far from my head. And a cowboy had run in between and pushed them on my back. And everybody's quiet as I'm there lying in the dirt. And all of a sudden, I get up and I start brushing myself off, and they start laughing. And they're pointing and they're laughing and everything else. And I was, I was a little ticked off, but I didn't show it. But inside I was. And so the boss came over to me and he says, "Hey, they're not laughing at you. They're laughing with you. Because there, but for the grace of God, go them." And we've all been there. We've all had things that happen. So, you just joined an exclusive club. And it really changed my attitude in the sense of, in civilization, what do? We start thinking about ourselves and, oh gosh, did I look stupid or everything else? And,
Right.
instead of, hey, you just had an experience that not many people are going to get a chance to have. And you're in the company of people, cowboys and cowgirls, and a couple of young 12-year-olds, who you joined an exclusive club, and I'll never forget that. It was just so wonderful. But the laughing, oh boy! And that's when the guy told me, he said, "Well, what doesn't kill you is funny." And now I know what it means.
What a great story. We've talked about this, haven't I? We've had the good fortune to hunt and fish all over the world, Ivy and I have. And I've told you this. The best people I've ever met in my life are around campfires. Mm-hmm. They're because that's as honest as it gets. It's just real.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You meet great people.
Oh, well, it certainly seems like one of those 12 rules for life, and I think that culture today, it's just like people are so afraid to fail or make mistakes. And that is part of learning and growing and,
being human?
Just improving. And I love that. Sometimes we forget also that life doesn't have to be so serious that we can't just laugh at our mistakes. Hey, it happened. I can do better next time. Move on.
I like the point
And
that it's an experience.
something, Ivy? That to me is so basic. If you go back and look at periods of our country's history, when we've faced a lot of difficult times, like maybe the Great Depression, Will Rogers brought humor. And if you really go look, he poked fun at all of them. He didn't care what letter they were wearing on their uniform. He thought they were all a bunch of crooks. So, and Mark
He
Twain
was right.
was the same way. What's that?
They said he was right. They are a bunch of crooks.
He was right. I remember there was, somebody told me one time, and I worked in Washington, he said, what a consultant in Washington is? It's a guy that looks at your watch and tells you what time it is and then steals your watch.
Right?
That's a good way to put it. Will Rogers, I was just in Washington recently. He's got a statue there in Statuary Hall, right in the entrance coming in. So he made quite an impact in this country by being humorous during difficult times, didn't he? Yeah,
and if we are gonna get so dadgum serious about everything and stop the idea, some things are funny, and it eases the tension. And guys like Senator Kennedy, I always like to listen to him because he has that old talk. You could see him. He could have been around in any generation or any century in our country. He'd have fit right in.
Yep.
And that's how I feel. That's what I want. I want people to laugh again at themselves, laugh at each other for a little bit, but not at their expense.
Yeah. Just remember, in John Kennedy's words, life is hard. It's harder when you're stupid.
Yeah. I mean, and it's, which is, I think all of us, quote unquote, humorists, we like to think about, something that basic, and it is basic. Mm-hmm. I mean, there's another one that, that goes, you don't like doing something, or it feels like it's so good. It's like when you hit your hand with a hammer. It feels good when you stop.
Yeah. That's so true. You compiled this list of rules. And that's why we enjoy these conversations so much, because we have so many experiences, and we've done, trust me, I've done some silly things out in the world when we've been hunting and fishing and doing different things and had these experiences. But the problem that I see, and I'd like you to talk about this, you've got people, especially, I think social media is poison, by the way. We do it because we have to. I mean, it's part of our job.
Right.
We can't get around it.
Too.
but it's poison. I mean, how do these people wake up every day so pissed off, so angry, just want to attack and shred and insult? I'm like, that's just exhausting to read sometimes, because we have good laughs. I mean, look, we do serious work. We talk about politics and all things going on in the world. But you are so right. You have to laugh. And the exhaustion of having to be that angry all the time, it'd be soul crushing, wouldn't it?
Yeah, but you guys have the experience of a crisp morning out in nature, getting ready to go hunt, right? Or fishing,
Yeah.
right?
Absolutely.
And there's no, you might not have service, so who cares?
Great.
Right? But you know that experience. That's the reality of life. And it's like when I go out, to ride and stuff, or just to go visit my horse or whatever, it's like, people say, "Oh, that stinks." I say, "Well, that's perfume to me," and your guys' perfume is something that God has provided for us, and you're going to have a wonderful day, and you're not about to mess up your day listening to what some yahoo said, clacking away in the middle of the night on their phone. And I think I've always thought that the internet in general has got two pipes. And one pipe, you can get good information, you can learn some things. And the other pipe is filth. It's just sewage.
Yeah, sewer pipe.
And yeah, it is a sewer pipe. And problem is the kids have tapped into the sewer pipe. And that's dangerous. And if we got kids that are sitting around staring at screens all day, and I was getting some coffee the other day. I usually get my coffee at the gas station because I prefer it. But I had to go in this little local coffee shop, and they're sitting at a table together, 4 people, and they're going like this.
Right? I never understand that.
Why don't you ask each other how their day's going?
You talk about that a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah, it frustrates me. Like, why don't you have a conversation? Put those away. Set them aside. The real world is here.
You know what's worse though, and you'll point. Ivy will point this out to me a lot. We try to endeavor, and she's better at it than I am. But if we're out having lunch or dinner, you set the phone down. But you'll point out, look at those two on a date. How are they even on a date? Because they're both like this, staring at their phones. It's just like, how do you get to know somebody?
Yeah, it's so true. But it's the reality that we live in today. I think that we're just so consumed by a cell phone or social media or whatever it is, and we've forgotten to get back to nature. And it's just it's soul food.
And relationships.
Right, and relationships.
It poisons everything. So it's not just the social media, Patrick. It's these devices that they've gotten. Remember how they promised this would set you free? This doesn't set me free. I used to one of my favorite things as an American is to go to the supermarket, because I can buy everything from tires to a T-bone and everything in between right in there, right? And I used to go to the grocery store and walk around and I would think to myself, what a country. As I'd look at all this great stuff, and I know what's, at the time, what Soviet grocery stores looked like, or Chinese grocery, they were empty, right, or whatever. And I would just marvel at what wonderful the country is I live in. And now you go to the grocery store, you get a text. Well, somebody's calling you. It's like, it's screwed up my I've lost my mojo, I guess, in the grocery store, because what they promised freedom is nothing more than an electronic tether to me.
Yeah. And you can't live without it.
That's right.
Although
based and I do this most weekends, and I'll share this with you and get your thoughts on this. I read Charlie Kirk's new book after he died, and we knew Charlie, not as intimately as some, but I'd call him a friend. Certainly, we worked at the same network and so forth. He wrote a book, Stop in the Name of God, where he says, take this device and turn it off. Pick a time in the week where you can turn it off for at least 24, 25 hours. I've been doing that from Friday night till Saturday. Most weekends, sometimes a little interference, but if you just disconnect, and Ivy knows this, because she leaves hers on in case of emergency, in case the kids need to find us, but generally we just step away from it. It's liberating, isn't it?
It's so liberating, yeah. It is. It's so important because we get, you're busy with work, you're checking emails, you're checking what your kid's schedule is, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And you forget to just be present in life. And I think that is so lost today and unfortunate.
The noise, yeah. I mean, just the noise. And so what do you think of that? It was in Charlie Kirk's book. I recommend anybody read it. Stop the Name of God, just because it gave you tools to say, you know what? Take time to talk to the person you're looking at. Don't sit at lunch and stare at your phone. Get out, ride a horse, get run over by a calf. I mean, if that's what it takes to connect you to the world, whatever it is, right? I mean, we have to get back to relationships, and weekend warriors and keyboard warriors are not it, are they?
No, they're not. And, unfortunately, we've also created this term influencers.
Oh, yeah.
And, and they've, apparently you can make some money off it or whatever. But, if you can't communicate verbally, you're not only missing out on something, you're not going to advance in your life. And these young kids, I don't think they know it yet, because because we're finally getting that first generation that's really been raised from cradle to now with the phone in their hands, literally, right?
Yeah.
I mean, we kind of been building up to this moment. And, to me, it's the ability not to talk. When you're young, you're in school, and I remember you stood up and you'd recite a poem, and then we'd bow, Or the little girls would curtsy, right, after reciting their poem. But you had to learn the words, maybe memorize them, and you'd stumble over it, and your parents in the audience saying, "Oh, please let her remember," But we did it.
Yeah, that's right.
And again, it's one of those moments. Yeah, there might have been a kid who might make fun, but I don't. For the most part, we all loved the fact that we got through our little piece, because nobody got through it unscathed.
Right.
And I remember when I used to do some training with some guys in a PR firm, they asked me to help these couple of young people who'd just been hired. So I sat with them, and I said to one of them, I said, "Tell me a story." And he said, "What do you mean?" I said, "Tell me a story." He looked at me like I was from Mars. Mind you, this is 15 years ago. And I said, "Tell me something with a beginning, a middle, and an end. And I'll tell you what, if it has a lesson at the end, you're getting a bonus." He couldn't do it.
Couldn't do it.
And I said to him, I said, "What business do you think you're in?" "Well, we're in the public relations business." I said, "Uh-huh. What does he think that is?"
Storytelling.
"Well, we write press releases and we do this and do that." And I said, "No." I said, "Those are things. You're in the business of telling stories."
That's
People
right.
hire us to tell their story. They hire us to help them when they get in trouble, but mostly it's to tell their story. That's
right.
what we're supposed to do. And if you can't tell me a story, how are you going to tell the client's story?
That's right.
Well, what came out of that? A blank stare?
Oh,
or
I'm
what?
sure he's I'm sure he's a senior vice president somewhere now. But he was a nice enough kid. He just, he was he wasn't offended or anything. I just think, because of the way that they taught the profession, they taught it by tactics. Learn how to write a press release. Learn how to do this. But if you can't write a press release unless you know what's the story?
That's right.
And reporters nowadays, if you read a newspaper, and there's not many left,
No.
or even articles on, that are supposed to be news stories, nowhere in that story is the old AP style of who, what, why, when, where in the lead paragraph. Right?
Yeah.
That's it. That's journalism. I hate to tell these people that all their opinions don't mean crap, because opinions are like belly buttons. Everybody's got one.
Yeah.
That's not the truth.
Unfortunately.
Yeah. So anyway, I mean, they're not news stories. It's some young person's opinion. And quite frankly, after being around for 73, almost 74 years, I don't care to hear their opinion.
Fair enough. Two things about what you just said. Number one, the Associated Press died a few years ago. It's basically a useless operation. You know that. And number two, you took me back to my childhood when I had to memorize and recite 208 words known as the Gettysburg Address.
Gettysburg Address. Yep.
Yeah,
There you go.
208 words, 2 minutes. I did
Yep.
it.
Good for you.
I made it. I must have been like 5th or 6th grade. But I just got in the time machine and went for a ride with you. And see, that's why stories are so important, connecting with people,
Yeah.
right?
Yep. And it's and I remember 8th grade. To get out of the 8th grade, you had to be able to recite the Gettysburg Address
There you go.
and the preamble to the Constitution.
There you go.
Yeah, most people
when the
don't even read
Gettysburg
it
War
anymore.
score and 7 years ago, our fathers brought forth on this, earth, blah, blah, blah. You had to do it. There's a great, and I love Andy Griffith and the old Andy Griffith show.
Sure.
There's a thing where Barney is telling Andy, he brings his old, because Opie's learning history, and he brings his old history book. He says, oh, yeah, he goes, I was great in history. And Andy goes, you were? And he says, oh, yeah. So he says, I can do the preamble to the Constitution. Go ahead, hold the book on me. So Andy opens the book, and he looks down, and he says, okay, go. And Barney goes, the Constitution of the United States. What's the first word? And he goes, and Andy says, we. And he goes, we? Are you sure? And it's one of the greatest little comedy routines you'll ever see. It's on YouTube all over. And at the end, Andy's basically giving him every word. And Barney goes, see, I did it, I'll never forget it. But
Yeah.
you're right. That's what we used to have to do. And it's not, and they always talk about nowadays, well, kids shouldn't just learn how to memorize stuff. Yes, they should.
Yeah, they
Because
should.
memorization is mental discipline, teacher.
That's right.
You have to teach to be able to think, create critically. You have and make life decisions every day, whether to use a Phillips head or a flathead. Of course, the screw's going to tell you which one. But to make critical decisions, what do you have to have? You have to have tools, and one of the tools is how to memorize stuff so that you can pull up the facts of things that you need going forward, and to discipline your brain, how to do things. Your brain is not something you just plug into the wall like those phones we were talking about.
That's right.
And kids need mental discipline. They need mental exercises. So when I hear teachers go, well, that's not the modern way, and I said, well, no wonder the kids are coming out of school and they can't spell cat, even if you give them the C and the A.
Right.
So much truth there, no question about it.
Well, Patrick, that sounds like some tools that you have, some rules for life. The Cowboy Edition rules for life. Can you talk to us about those?
Well, I'm not original in having created my own rules for life. Those are mine. But, growing up, on Saturday mornings, we had the Lone Ranger. In the movie theater, you had Hopalong Cassidy. There was Roy Rogers. And each, Gene Autry, all of the TV cowboys of my youth had a code. And, it might have come on the cereal box. And the code was like, be kind to animals, honor your. It was basically the 10 Commandments with a few other things thrown into it. And, that was an aid for parents. And look, I'm certainly not trying to tell people through my book or my talks or anything that was so perfect. Everything was perfect. There was plenty wrong. In any era, there's plenty wrong. But, the ability to have something to fall back on, and that's the one thing I love to talk about, is when you're young people, what do you fall back, what do you judge your actions against? Do you have an inner code? And people say, well, they're kids. No. That's the time to instill a code of life in them so that when something comes, like I remember an incident years ago, many years ago now, you're a bunch of kids and there's an old abandoned house and, well, let's go throw rocks through the whatever windows are left in that old house at the end of the street. And, there's peer pressure and you might give in. But whether you don't give in or give in to the temptation, at some point you're going to have to sit with yourself and maybe on a sore bottom from your father.
Yeah.
And you're going to have to say, I shouldn't have done that. That was against my code. And you have to learn you can't just go along with the herd because everybody wants to charge down the street. And to me, it's like the kids today, they're running down the street after ICE officers and stuff, and a lot worse. But it's the same mentality. Hey, let's go throw rocks through the broken window or through the windows of the old house. No, that's wrong. That guy's enforcing the law. You might not like it. And if you really don't like it, go stand across the street and you can holler all you want. But, what you're doing is wrong. And they don't have any code to judge their actions against. And that's the one thing that I would love to instill to young people. And it's not to be harsh, and it's not to be, again, the old guy shouting, "Get off my lawn." It's more like saying, hey, why don't you think about what you're doing before you're doing that?
This is
Think
something.
about what it might mean to you.
This is something that we have talked about a lot, Ivy, and that is this sense of lawlessness comes from the classroom. This sense of no rules and treat the teacher however you want and do it starts in the classroom, the local school, doesn't it?
Well, I think that we're so focused on, this lifting up the emotions of every kid. Like, well, sometimes you're not going to like your teacher, and sometimes you're not going to like consequences, and sometimes you're going to like not being told no. And all those things might be uncomfortable, and that's okay. It is. And we forget, I think, society today, like also, sometimes your emotions aren't real or right. I'm angry, so therefore I'm going to be disrespectful to my teacher. And teachers, my goodness, they have a very tough job because they have no ability to control their classrooms.
Put a hand on me. We're going to sue you, says the kid to the teacher, right? That sort of stuff.
Or just,
right.
I know better than you. What do you know? It's like there isn't this ingrained sense of respect. And I know that, first of all, that starts at home. And second of all, there isn't any authority in the classroom because, quite frankly, the teacher doesn't have any.
It's been taken away over time.
It's been taken away. Yeah. And we're so focused on, Johnny needs to be happy all the time. Well, actually, he doesn't.
Johnny doesn't.
Exactly.
Yeah, because here's what Ivy's heard me say this before. Sorry, but what if Johnny is stupid? All right, we stop coddling the children. Maybe Johnny's got a different path in life. Maybe he's not going to the university. Maybe he's going to become a really good craftsman with wood and be a carpenter. But, stop trying to teach. And the other thing that drives me wild, Ivy, this. Stop trying to teach boys that are bouncing around in their chair to be, well-behaved little girls. They're not. They are different. Boys and girls, regardless of what you might see on social media, there is a difference between boys and girls, Patrick. I think you know that.
Well, yeah, I've come to realize that after 2 ex-wives and a couple ex-girlfriends. Yeah, I think I figured that part out.
Yeah, sorted that wheat from the chaff.
Yeah, but you're right. And it's funny here in St. George, and it's pretty conservative. I remember, and you guys remember too, when in high school we had wood shop, metal shop, electrician shop, all kinds of shops.
All gone.
And just like you said, not every kid's, going to go to college, nor should they. And nowadays, I know guys from high school, and I just went to they keep adding them, 55th or whatever high school reunion. And, you run into guys and you haven't seen in a while. And I remember, and I know what they did when they got out of school. This one guy, his dad had a cabinet shop. And he went right out of high school into, his dad's cabinet shop. He took it over, and it was a successful business. And he did better than a lot of other people. And he was happy, and he retired on his terms. And he bought some real estate, because he had the opportunity to buy rental. You know what I mean?
Sure.
He did great. So this nonsense that and especially with boys, because you gotta help them along. And we as men got to remember that being a man doesn't come from the bottom of a can. And being a man means standing up straight. Being a man means knowing the difference between right and wrong, protecting the weak, all the different things. again, from the old cowboy codes that we got. And to me, everybody when I hear people say, well, you're just talking old fashioned. Well, sometimes old fashioned actually worked.
Yeah,
That's right.
It certainly did. I want to ask you about that. You said you're 73, so close enough.
Yep.
And so when you grew up, and I was born 20 years after the end of the Second World War, look, parents of kids that I was friends with, their parents had fought in World War II. Their
Right.
parents or grandparents had survived the Great Depression. There was a reverence for this nation, and this nation has been spoiled, the latest generation, in my estimation, and that's one of the problems. Another problem is a lack of real men, real fathers operating in the sphere of their children. I think that there's a lot of problems with not having enough dads in this country. But growing up, my best friend growing up, his dad drove a tank in Patton's Third Army across Europe. It was a different mindset, right?
Yep. And my high school teachers, a couple of them, one of them my track coach jumped into Normandy with the 101st.
Yeah.
Our football coach, he was on Iwo as a young second lieutenant, landed on Iwo Jima.
Oof, that was a rough place.
Yeah. And I remember, as you get older, you start plucking stuff out of your long-term memory because short-term memory's not as good. And by the way, the long-term's probably a lot more fun. But I remember distinctly when we would, before a track meet, and we were county champions and all kinds of stuff. And so, we'd be in there was a wrestling room and it wasn't wrestling season. So all the track team would get in there, and the assistant coach would walk in, and he'd walk in, stand and say, everybody up. And the coach would walk into the front of the room. And we're all standing straight and quiet. Not at attention, but we're standing up. And then he would say, be seated.
Discipline.
And also, as I thought about it over the years, I realized something. He looked at us like the football coach would look at his players, as the 18-year-old kids who were on the beach with them at in Normandy or on the beach at Iwo Jima. They looked at us. You guys are going to have to take over the country at some point. And he looked at our little baby faces with acne and maybe trying to grow a mustache. And he would look at us, and I'm sure now more than ever, I'm convinced that he looked at us and said, I've got to help shape these men.
That's right.
And to me, I would love to see more veterans get into the teaching profession. I wouldn't mind developing a program. I don't know how you do it. I'm not an expert. But you know something? We're going to lose another generation of young men to video games and depression and suicide and all the other nasty stuff. And
Weed.
to me also if I had a place big enough, I'd have kids working as cowboys from dawn till dusk.
Heck yeah.
And to me, you gotta, we can't expect them to raise themselves, and we as men have got to stand up and say, I'm here for you.
Yeah, let me share a story here with you real quick. There's a neighbor of ours here, and they're all in their 60s now, three sons. And when they were all in their, 12, 13, 14 years old, they got home from school one day, and there was a moving truck in front of the house. And they said, what's going on, Dad? We're moving. And he had gotten rid of all the toys and games and bullshit, frankly. He got rid of all of that. And he said, what are we doing? We're moving to a farm. And he moved that whole family to a farm, and they began doing chores every day. And every one of those guys is wildly successful. There's an attorney, there's a land developer, I don't remember what the third one doesn't matter, but I've heard their story. And they live here near us in some of the nicest houses and the nicest setups because they learned about real work. And I think you're exactly right about we got to teach ethics, discipline, work ethic is maybe that's the thing that I've talked about this a lot in my program, and I've talked about this, but work ethic just seems like work ethic to me for way too many people doesn't exist anymore. It's just too easy. You got instant fast food on the corner. You've got video games. You've got 27,000 TV channels to look at, and your phone and your computer. We're driven by entertainment.
Well, quite frankly, I think the root of having a good work ethic is self-respect, because you know
Very
that.
much so.
Yeah, you've got to go and do the job that you promised to do, that you got hired for. And if you don't have enough self-respect for that, and then you don't know what that means to have respect, then you're never going to go do a good job, no matter what job you do. And so,
yeah.
Go ahead.
No, it's sorry to interrupt, but I mean, to me, it's also that idea that, the first job, the first paycheck, it is so important because the first job teaches you, one, you're right, self-respect. Hey, I did it. Right. And also, you showed up on time, you worked the job hard, and you were rewarded in the end. And guess what? The government took a good portion of it. But anyway.
Right.
So you learn another lesson. But to me, it's like that job is the first one. Whether it was sweeping floors or I used to work in a butcher shop when I was about 12 and scraping the block and everything else. And we got to make dog food from all the scraps on Saturday. It was a lot of fun. But then you get your next job. And again,
it builds.
Jobs aren't just to make money. Jobs are also to get you shaped up, because eventually the jobs are going to get more complex and you're going to have to have more responsibility. And the only way to get more responsibility is to prove that you can do the job and to prove that you're a good employee. And also, if you want to get ahead, work a little harder. This isn't brain surgery, what the three of us are talking about.
Right.
And again, I know people say, you're being too easy. Yeah, you don't know. Nah. You know something? It's because we listen to the likes of those voices for too long that we're having to get our voices involved.
That's right.
Yeah, soft skills. I had never heard this term until a few years ago, soft skills. I was telling somebody, well, we've got to hire people. We've got to make sure they have the soft skills first. What does that mean, I said? Well, it means that they show up on time and they're dressed properly, and that's just, you have to teach this to people now. You have to teach. In fact, it was so bad. I got a good friend of mine, owns a couple of different companies, and he had somebody come in for an interview, and the first question the person asked in the interview is, am I getting paid for this interview? And he looked right at him and he said, what interview? Have a nice day.
Yeah, right.
I mean, seriously, they feel entitled to get paid for everything they do. They should be compensated. They should get patted on the back. They should be told how wonderful they are all day long. I've talked about this. One of my first bosses currently lives in Puerto Vallarta, Mexico, where they've had all these cartel problems recently.
Oh, yeah.
The guy was a jackass, all right? He was brutal to me. I freaking hated him. Right? This guy, he nothing I did was good enough. No, Gruber, you got to do this. No, Gruber, what are you doing? It was exhausting. He became a good friend of mine over time. He's probably 80, 85 now. And he was texting me while that was going on in Puerto Vallarta recently. So here's a guy who was just brutal to me. But you end up
with shape you.
Respect is the word you used.
And also, I think, helps shape you.
Absolutely. It instilled in me, get it right. Don't screw it. And his brother ran a gas station, and I'd be out there in the cold and snow in Michigan, and you run in those days, you had the old-fashioned credit card machine where you had to put it in and run it over, that deal. Yeah. And so I'd run in, and I'd go, oh, I missed the license plate. And the one guy looked at me, he goes, don't ever come back in here until you know the license plate every time, first time. I never missed a license plate after. Again, train the brain, right? Do it right. Work ethic. Train the brain. Have discipline. There is a system. And those guys, look, you're not going to like, my boss is mean. My teacher wasn't nice. Nobody gives a shit. All right? No, nobody cares.
But yet, And let me tell you too, and to the young people out there in the world, no child is born entitled.
That's right.
And, you know, that's up to parents, but it's also up to society as a whole to establish what is acceptable behavior.
That's right.
And, you know, recently went to the airport and and I hadn't been flying much lately, and my goodness, everybody's coming in their pajamas and bedroom slippers. And,
I don't
and,
understand this.
and you know, and then I see,
Patrick,
sometimes
the-
I'll see a father and a son, and the father's got, T-shirt that says beer belly under construction, and how can you have any respect for that?
You can't. And we call them soft pants, by the way.
Yeah. Well, some of them are a little too soft, and a little too revealing, but but again, we as a society, I love young folks, and a word about the young folks of America. When I watch them out there and doing jobs and stuff, and and here in St. George, there's a lot of yes sir, no sir, and that kind of thing. Yes ma'am, no ma'am, and it's really refreshing, quite frankly. But to me, we tend to listen to the voices that are hollering the loudest, and not the ones that are getting up and going to work, or the young men and women who are out and defending the country this very morning. And all of that stuff, we let the squeaky wheel dictate things, and we got to back up the young people that are doing the right thing. We've got to point them out as much as we can as examples, and we don't have to punish the other ones. This isn't about reward and punishment. This is about that's the way to be.
That's right.
If this country, which is going to be 250 years old, is to survive another 250 and beyond, we have got to go inside ourselves. If you think that politicians who created this mess are going to fix it, you're dead wrong. So we have to fix it, the societal parts, ourselves. It ain't about passing laws. It ain't about signing anything. It's about us as Americans taking the good parts, getting rid of the bad parts, and making sure that we can survive going forward. Because forget 250, if we're not careful and we keep ripping this old place apart, ripping Old Glory apart, I don't know if we're going to make it another 2, let alone 250.
That's right.
I think that was a mic drop moment.
Yeah.
Well
It's
done,
so
Patrick.
true. I mean, we have to get out and influence our young people. It's so important, and to, be able to show them, hey, this is the way that you should be living your life. And by doing so, you'll have a much greater life.
Install values, which
Right. Instill values. Yeah.
and don't let the school raise your kid, and don't let the machine raise your kid. Be a parent.
Yep.
Be involved.
And have those tough discussions about, for fathers to their sons, what is it to be a man? Hey, you're becoming it, and you're developing into a man. What does that look like?
Yeah, we're doing
And
a lot
for
of that
young
lately.
women, the same thing. What does that look like?
And exactly. I'm glad you brought that up, Ivy. That's exactly right. I don't want to focus on one gender or the other. Well, I think we still got 2. And
time
it
I
is
checked.
young boys and young girls. And I was thinking, I was talking to my fiance. I'm getting married in August, so I think I've got it right this time. She's a wonderful
right.
woman. And we were driving home from Salt Lake, and we were talking, and I was, lately I've been thinking of a lot of stuff my dad taught me. My mom taught me the cowboy stuff, and she taught me a lot and about the cowboy way and stuff. But it's more than that. I don't want to make it compartmentalized, because she was tough as saddle leather, and if you crossed her, I'll hold your coat while she kicks your ass. But my dad, the way he used to do things, when we used to ask, well, what should I do? You come to him with a problem, he says, well, And you'd tell him, you'd outline the problem. It wasn't like he had to guess. And he'd say, what do you think you should do? And this is when, you're in your teens and stuff, and you're becoming a man. And, it wasn't that he was being disinterested. He was trying to make me come up with the answers. But what was that based on? That's based upon all the years leading up to then, when he taught me, how do you think, critically think, like I was talking about a second ago, right? So he would say, well, what do you think you should do? Well, I think I ought to do this. Okay. And what are the consequences if you do it that way? Just just leading me along, but I'm the one who has to make the call. And at the end of that conversation, it was, okay, I think I know what to do. He didn't say, what's your decision? He trusted me, and that's something that's so important. He trusted me enough that I had thought it through and it was the right decision. He didn't need to know what it was. And I think that was even more important, because I was going to have to go out in the world, and I was going to have to make my decision and live with the consequences.
You had to execute the plan.
Yeah. It wasn't his plan. It wasn't, do it this way, these are the 3 steps, and then, we'll grade the paper later. No, that's part of everything in life. You got to think. I've always said that every young man and young woman, when they graduate high, maybe sooner now, should get a toolkit. And it should have a flathead screwdriver, a Phillips screwdriver, a pair of pliers, maybe a crescent wrench, a hammer, for ones that won't cut themselves, maybe a saw. Just a basic toolkit. And I know people say, well, what do they need it for?
Life.
They might, but also it's a symbol. It's a symbol. You have to have the right tools. You have to have tools to fix your problems in life. You got to have tools. Sometimes those tools they're other things, but that to me would be the symbol. Here's your beginner's toolkit. Go forth in the world.
Good stuff.
I love that.
Patrick Dorinson, we're going to leave it there for today. I could talk to you if we were around a campfire, like I said, the best people I meet are around campfires, usually in the mountains, right? There's no question about it. Whether you're on a trout trip or an elk trip or just walking up there on your horse, riding up there on your horse. Or
sitting at the end of a bar having a drink.
Or the man at the end of the bar. Of course, his horse is parked outside. The book, guys, is The Common Sense Cowboy's Guide to Life. Stories from the old guy at the end of the bar. Well, Patrick, you're a pretty good old guy at the end of the bar. We really appreciate you being here. Do you have social media for the folks?
Yeah, they can go to my Facebook page, or they can go to, on X, it's @ridenbeamer.com.
All right. Patrick, it's been
and I have a website, patrickdorinson.com, and they can get the book there too.
patrickdorinson.com will get that. It's been a real honor. Thank you.
You bet, you guys. I love you.
Love you too. It's been a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll do it someday at the end of the bar.
All
there
right.
you go. I'd love that.
Fair enough.
And you pick the bar, and I'll be there.
All right. Sounds
All right.
good.
Thank you, sir. There you
bet.
have it. What a conversation. I mean, I haven't laughed that much in a long time.
There are so many great, valuable little tidbits, too, that I just love.
Yeah.
Things that you don't necessarily think about. It was just a different way of thinking about things that I loved.
Well, a couple of things that I pull out of that. Memorization, he's right about that.
Yeah.
Memorize and know how to make your brain, access the different places. Having a toolkit. Here's your toolkit, because it's an idea that life takes tools and you have to use these things.
Right.
I think that's just fabulous.
Absolutely, because that's the reality of life. You're going to need tools. Communication, that's like one of the key tools in life. If you can't communicate effectively, you're not going to really do well.
And that doesn't mean sending nasty messages on some social media. Not that. Having communication, having relationships.
And having, ethics. And I love that, the way that his dad said to him, hey, what do you think the solution is?
Right. I like that a lot.
I think that's so great, especially for young men. But yeah, what a great conversation.
It was terrific.
Yeah.
Follow us and become a subscriber on YouTube. That's what I'm asking you to become a subscriber on YouTube. Lots of great conversations. And some of them, I hope they're different. Leave us comments right down here when you do that. Tell us what you like. Hey, if there's somebody you'd like to hear from, let us know. Smash the like button, of course. And we'll drop a new episode Monday mornings at 9 a.m. Eastern Time. Thank you for joining us today on Forgotten America.